Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode is designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. One of our most downloaded episodes of all time, and it may not surprise you to hear, is the episode we did way back in October of 2019 called How to Last Longer in Bed, 5 Practices. It may also not surprise you to hear that one of our most downloaded PDFs of all time on doinnerwork.com resources is the accompanying piece that we put together for that podcast, which is a PDF that has the 5 practices on how to last longer in bed. I will be linking both that episode and the link to that downloadable PDF in the show notes. And by the way, if you're familiar with our resources page on doinnerwork.com/resources, which has all of the book lists, the recommended book lists we put together, the downloadable meditations on how to design your future, the Corey Muscara meditations, and these 5 practices on how to last longer in bed, you will find that we have just launched a new website, soft launch, of DominickQ.com, where all the Do Inner Work stuff has been rerouted. And it's a beautiful new website with all of the free resources. It has all the information about the digital mastermind and the masterminds if you want to get more info about that. We will be updating that page. There's a lot, that website, there's still a lot more work to be done, but there's a soft launch that we just did with all the resources that you're familiar with the podcast link, all the good stuff, and you will see that linked in the show notes. So let's get into this discussion today on how to last longer in bed, because I didn't even realize it's been nearly 2 years since we've had like a pointed conversation about this. And you know, this is a conversation that we've been talking about with the men in the masterminds recently, because we all, to a man, know what it feels like to finish before, or as one of the men in our mastermind says that I say all the time, pop off too early. We all know what that experience is like. And if you're in the heat of the moment and your partner's into it and you're just getting going, or you're at, your partner's at the height of it, and then you lose it before you wanted to, there can be a significant amount of shame or embarrassment or guilt that's associated with it. Maybe you have been shamed by your partner in the past. Maybe this is a pattern that you've experienced and you can see the disappointment in your partner's face. Maybe you're with a new partner and it happened faster, and maybe now they have a certain perception, or you think they have a perception of how you are in bed, or they're judging you in bed. There's a lot of stuff, emotional and otherwise, that can come up around this. And so I wanted to have like a thoughtful conversation about how we've all been there, how there is guilt and shame that can be kicked up around that. And I can certainly resonate with it because I've experienced that in the past, but also to alleviate that because it happens to all of us. And I want to talk about like how you can last longer while also how to deal with those situations where it does happen, right? And to handle it with great man type of resourcefulness. So let me start with maybe a disarming story that I'm sure I've shared at some point somewhere along the way on this podcast about a time where I lost it faster than I wanted to. And I think this is one of the funnier stories from my sexual history. So I was in my 4 years of Sex Addicts Anonymous recovery. So this was somewhere between 2013 and 2017, where I was not masturbating for 4 years, not watching porn for 4 years. And I was in the middle of an 11-month celibacy. So if you can imagine that, 11 months, no sex, while also in that odyssey of no masturbation and no pornography. And I was going out on a few dates with this gorgeous Persian woman who just hit all of like my physical desires, right? We just had this chemistry. She wasn't even, like she aggravated me on so many levels, but just the chemistry, sometimes, you know what I'm talking about, guys, right? Like there's that person who just pushes all of those sexual buttons, and she had it for me. So we'd gone out on 4 or 5 dates. I think it was our 5th date where we finally decided to go back to her place. Now she's got this beautiful apartment in Tribeca, high rise, overlooking the Hudson River. floor to ceiling windows. So it's nighttime, New York City, sexy vibe going on. She's got this sheepskin rug that's laid out on the floor overlooking the Hudson River. She puts on this romantic music, lights a few candles, scented. All the senses are being stimulated. And we lay down on the floor. And guys, I hadn't even had a makeout session in like 5 or 6 months. And here I am in the middle of this like 4-year period of no masturbation, no porn, 11-month celibacy. And as soon as my lips meet hers, I go from 0 to 60 in a nanosecond. My blood is boiling. My heart is racing. Like I'm at full attention. Obviously, you know what I mean? And so I feel like so my hand is on her face, making out with her, running my hand through her hair, and I start the migration of my hand down her face, down her neck, and it's going towards her chest. And guys, as soon as my hand touches her breast, I explode in my pants. It's like done. Like I'm talking not like rubbing her breast, it touches her breast. And I explode in my pants like a teenage boy. Now, fortunately, like our crotches weren't touching, so she had no idea that I had just lost it, right? And we're continuing to make out. So now I have like a little bit of time to figure out how do I handle this situation? Because if this thing escalates, she will find out very quickly that I'm already finished. And so I quickly devise and concoct this plan to say, and I pull away from her face and I said, you know what? I think we've gone far enough for the first night. And she looks at me and she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, let's take this slow. And she's like, wow, you're such a gentleman. And fortunately, I had this like shirt that was untucked. So like the flaps just covered the wet spot that was probably the size of like a dinner plate in my pants. And, I stood up and I gave her my hand and asked, got her to stand up, and she gave me this hug. She's like, this was so beautiful. Are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I think we should stop for now. And I was able to leave that apartment feeling like I'd had my dignity intact. Now, guys, I only did this at the time because I didn't really have the emotional maturity. I hadn't had conversations about like how to handle a situation like that. And it's a funny story, but looking back on it, if I'd had the tools then that I have now, I truly would have told her what was going on. I would have actually shared with her what had happened, and I would have wanted to confront the awkwardness and the weirdness and actually have a conversation with her, bring her into the reality of what I was going through, right? Like what had just happened. But I didn't have all of that. I didn't have the tools and the skill set at that point in time to navigate it. And so this conversation today is not just about how to give you practices on how to last longer in bed, but also what to do when you don't. Because inevitably, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're going to finish faster than you wanted. And then the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment, the judgment, all that stuff is going to come up. And then how do you handle it? From a place of you're a great man, right? Versus a little boy, someone who's ashamed, or just someone who hasn't had the conversation or practiced this before. So let's first get into how do you last longer in bed? And I'm going to refer you to the episode that we did, episode number 43, a year and a half, 2 years ago, on the 5 practices on how to last longer in bed. And I'm also going to refer you to that PDF that we have downloaded for you that you can download at doinnerwork.com/resources or dominickq.com/resources, all linked in the show notes. But where I really want to dive into today is like really one specific mindset, and then I'll actually unpack it with a tangible practice. But one specific mindset that if you were to embrace this and keep this front of mind at all times, it will change and transform how long you are able to last in bed. And by the way, let's just remember here, the reason why you want to last longer in bed is not to become some sort of porn star. It's because presumably you want to maintain connection with your partner for deeper, more intimate, more exciting, more sexy, more passionate, more innovative sex, right? And the mindset behind how to last longer in bed is to practice the way you want to play. Practice the way you want to play. Brian is the one who says this all the time on the podcast, right? Practice the way you want to play. If you're thinking about this in athletics, then you want to practice with the same level of intensity and diligence and power and focus, because when it comes game time, the way you've been practicing, the way you've been training is going to show up on autopilot in the game. If you do half-assed practices, if you show up with a half-assed work discipline, right, or half-assed focus, that is going to carry forward into the game. When we are talking about practice in the sexual context, practice is how you masturbate, okay? And like in my experience, most guys have never made that connection between how I masturbate is how I will show up in my sexual interaction with my partner. I was brought on a podcast with a young guy named Jake Heilbrunn. I think I have his name. I don't know how, maybe I got it half right. He has a podcast called Curious with Jake. And I'm going to link the episode that he and I did together, but he shared this story vulnerably, young guy in his 25 years old, where he met a woman, beautiful woman he was really attracted to. It got sexual. And then within like 3 to 5 minutes, he finished. And he was worried about like how she may perceived him. Is this how he always is? And we got into this conversation. He's like, how do I do this differently? And so I started asking him questions. I'm like, dude, so tell me about your masturbation practice. He's like, what do you want to know? I'm like, well, how long does it take for you to start and finish a masturbation session? He's like, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I'm like, guess. He goes, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay. So in those 5 to 10 minutes, like what's happening? Okay, well, I pull out my laptop, I pull out my iPhone, and I go to look at porn. Okay, cool. Do you watch the porn from the very beginning, or do you fast forward to a scene that's like, all out, you're in the middle of it? He goes, oh, of course, I fast forward to the middle of the scene. And then I get to the not roughest stuff, but it's the most intense stuff. I get to the climax scenes. And then I go from one of those scenes to the next porn scene, to the next porn scene. And I'm like, all right, so let's break this down for a minute. Like when you are in your own masturbation practice, you go from 0 to 60 right away. You flood your nervous system with the most intense stuff. You switch from one intense scene to another, and it seems like your intention is not necessarily to enjoy or to circulate the energy or to elongate the experience. It seems like the intention is to get excited as quick as possible and then to finish at the height of that excitement. And it was kind of like a aha moment, because obviously if you start to see that that's how you've trained yourself, then when you get into sexual practice with a partner, why would you expect it to be any different, right? Your nervous system is used to craving that same level of stimulation, and then your system gets flooded. And then when you get flooded, then you're at the height of that excitement, and then you release it. That's how your sexual system, nervous system has been trained. Now, here's the other part of this that can get kind of frustrating for a lot of guys. One of the things to combat that or to navigate away from that is to learn how to slow down, is how to slow down your nervous system. And that has to come through practice, right? In your masturbation practice, to slow down the speed with which you turn yourself on. Slow down, if you're watching porn, how quickly you go to some of those intense scenes. Maybe even needing to watch that cheesy crap that's terrible acting, the pool boy coming in and oh my God, like all that crap. Even like actually sitting through that garbage for a period of time so that you can actually start to slowly allow parts of the stimulation in. Instead of fast forwarding right to the part where the clothes have been ripped off and then the partner's naked, or whoever, like if you're watching women, if you're watching men, whatever you're into, maybe even allowing yourself to slowly take in some of the stimulation of seeing someone who's scantily clad, and then allowing like one piece of clothing to come off. Now, what you might find is that it's actually more difficult to get like a full-on erection in that, because the stimulation is, quote, not enough for you right now because you're so used to flooding the system. You might also find that that's the same thing when you're with a partner. if you've been used to moving at warp speed. And so to retrain your nervous system to practice the way you want to play, you may need to actually learn how to slowly let in more subtle stimuli. When I started to do this, guys, what I then started to notice after I did that in practice, when I started to do that with my partner, I could find that kissing my partner very slowly and smelling her skin and feeling the parts of her body, like the soft parts of her body, the more toned parts of her body. These were the things that actually were starting to allow slowly that energy to come in. And that energy felt warm. It felt exciting. And when it started to circulate in my body, I could feel it in my crotch, but I could also feel it in the rest of me. So every part of me was turned on, not just that concentrated section of the crotch, which when it's too hyper concentrated, when all of the energy is in your erection, then one touch, one stroke, something can make you lose it because that energy wants a release. But if your entire body has that energy circulating, then you can not only feel the benefits and the joys of that energy all throughout, the pleasure all throughout your body, it's not as hyper concentrated. So you're not like looking for that release as fast as possible. So what I'm going to invite you to do as a very specific practice, guys, is the next time you jerk off, actually quantify how long it takes for you on a typical session to jerk off. Like record 2 or 3 sessions, just like put a timer out. And you may find, okay, it's 5 to 10 minutes, or maybe it's 15 minutes. Great, now you have a baseline. For your next few jerk off sessions, I want you to double that. Double it. So if you're at 5 minutes now, go to 10 minutes. If you're at 15 minutes, actually make it a half an hour long practice session. That may sound like a long time, but if you're actually like with a partner, 30 minutes of sex is not a very long time. It may be a more intermediate period of time, but it's actually not a long time for you to go through the layers of stimulation, of bringing on the excitement, of going deeper, of getting intimate. 15 of those 30 minutes with a partner may not even be penetrative. You may just be exploring each other's bodies. Like you can slow this down and have hours and hours of sex if you learn how to seduce that process of seduction. And if your body's not yet trained for it, then the practice session is going to be really, really powerful. So double the amount of time that you're using in your practice sessions. And then when you are stimulating yourself, start to circulate that energy through breath. If you are only feeling arousal concentrated in your crotch, then you realize that there's an opportunity for you to take breath and circulate through your body. How do you do it? One of the most powerful ways of doing this is you tighten your perineum, you squeeze your perineum like if you were taking a piss and then you need to stop your piss for whatever reason. Same muscle. So you could do that right now, like squeeze your piss. Like if you were to squeeze it, you'll feel your anus tighten, you'll feel like the tip of your penis tighten. That is a way for you to tighten, and then you're going to want to inhale all the way in while holding that tightness, and you should feel energy moving from your crotch, from your perineum, up your spine. And if you're able to draw that energy as far as possible, it will come all the way up your spine to the top of your head, and then even down the front of your body. So the way to do that again is when you're really excited, you want to exhale all the way, tighten your perineum like you're holding your piss or stopping a piss stream, and then inhale through your nose, and you can feel that energy come up through your body, through your spine, to the top of your head, and even down the front of your spine with the exhale. You do this enough times while you're excited, and you'll start to feel that energy circulating through your body. Now, when I started bringing this into my self-stimulation practice, and then I brought it into my sexual practice with partners, it was revolutionary for me. Here's a story to kind of like put an exclamation point on that. At the end of my 11 months of celibacy, while I was still on the 4 years of no masturbation, no porn, I found a partner who I did want to break that celibacy with. And when we decided to have sex together, and I shared with her, like, where I was, I hadn't had sex in a long time. I wanted her to be the partner. When we decided to get into that moment, and I had penetration for that first time, and we'd both gotten tested, so this was unprotected sex. As you could imagine, guys, like that feeling was almost overwhelming for me. And I had to go in as slowly as possible. It took me like 3 to 4 minutes for me to actually go all the way into her body, first stroke. And I had to like really communicate with her, looking her in the eyes and breathe slowly, intensely, just like I taught you to bring it into my body. And when I actually was fully in her, then I very, very slowly started to make the movements, and I asked her to work with me. And anytime that she started to kind of get like really excited, move too fast, I could feel like it was overwhelming my system. I had to ask her to slow down and dance with me. 15 minutes of this, guys. It took like 15 minutes where I was barely moving, she was barely moving, but we were communicating, allowed me to circulate that energy enough where eventually I was able to actually get the strokes in, to move out, and then to move faster, and then to like pound, and then to become an animal, like based on, if it felt good for her and for me. And we ended up having a sex for over an hour. She orgasmed 5 or 6 times. It was amazing. So both of us were having incredible pleasure, but those first 15 minutes, I was on the absolute edge. And this brings me to the last part of this, like how you practice is how you want to play. This conversation around edging, this practice around edging, which I describe in that PDF, right? The 5 practices on how to last longer in bed. Edging is this practice of when you are masturbating, you bring yourself to the point of no return, but right before that, you come back. So that point of I'm about to ejaculate, but you pull it back. The more time that you can practice getting to that edge and then pulling back. Practice getting to that point of bliss and wanting it, but then surrendering and bringing it back. The more time you can practice going to that edge, leaning out over it, but not tipping over or falling over, will allow you when you're with your partner to get to that edge and then to pull it back. Maybe you'll need to withdraw from the penetration. Maybe you need to stop stroking as hard. Maybe you'll need to take a breath. You will learn all of those little tools and tips that work for you when you practice that way, and you can bring it into bed. And I'll tell you, that stuff has worked time and time again. So the practice here is the mindset first. Practice like you want to play. Why? Not because you want to be a porn star, but because you want deeper, more intimate connection with your partner, to be there with that person, right? To be able to explore deeper, to be innovative. And the practice is, however long it is that you're taking to masturbate now, double it. And try this for a period of 2 weeks. Double the length of your time, which will mean slowing down how you arouse yourself. Slowing down, if you're watching porn, how quickly you get to those intense scenes. And practicing edging. When you get to the edge, pull it back. When you get to the edge, then tighten the perineum, take a breath, circulate that energy up to the top of your head, down the front. These are practices that are powerful. And finally, when that stuff doesn't work because you haven't mastered it yet, and then you end up in a situation where you finished faster than you wanted to, this is an opportunity for you to recognize that only a small percentage of sex and intimate connection needs to happen through the penis into the hole. Whether it's a vagina, whatever hole you're putting it into, your penis doesn't need to be the only thing that can continue the sexual experience. You still got a mouth, you still got a tongue, you still got fingers. Guys, I will tell you, one of the chief complaints I get from women about men and sex and in bed is that when a guy thinks that sex is over after he's come. What about the woman's sexual experience? What about where she's at? What about the fulfillment of her desires? And like I said, you still have fingers, a tongue, a mouth, plenty of other ways that you can continue even after maybe your dick goes offline for a little bit. And so there's an opportunity to engage with your partner and to step into your great man and to engage with your partner and say, okay, sweetheart, that ended faster than I would have wanted to, but I'm still here for you. And I've got a mouth, I've got a tongue, I've got these fingers. Where would you like to go? Or maybe just start touching in a certain way that maybe you think that she'll like, and then look at her and find out if it's working for her. Bring her into the equation and then stay with it, right? These are the ways that demonstrate that, hey, even if this is to happen, that you care about the satisfaction and the fulfillment of your partner's sexual desires. Gentlemen, sexual energy is one of the most potent energies in our bodies that we have access to. It's one of the most powerful for creation. It's one of the most blissful and enjoyable experiences that we will ever experience in our body. And of course, we want to master that profound energy so that we can have more rich, more fulfilling, more exciting, more joyful, more blissful, more intimate, connective experiences with ourselves and with our partners. But if you want that, just like anything else worthy of having in your life, you're going to have to put in the work. And you're going to have to practice the way that you want to play. And so I've just given you a number of different ways that you can start to transform your practice in your life so that you can play the way you want to. And a final reminder, in the show notes, I have a link to episode 43 on how to last longer in bed, 5 practices, along with the link to the PDF on 5 practices to last longer in bed.